Please share where you're watching from and consider subscribing to the channel. I was born in Chico, California, and dispatch lives in my spine like a second nervous system. Even on my days off, I hear phantom rings, that bright little needle of urgency punching through a quiet room. After a bad spring call, the kind that lands on the news as miscommunication, and then camps in your bloodstream, I took my brother to Yosemite, so the river could sand the sharp edges off me. Jonah was born in Fresno and moves through life like a golden retriever with a camera. He promised me no stunts, just vibes, which, coming from a man who once filmed himself free climbing a motel sign, felt like a prayer offered with fingers crossed. We came in on Highway 41, through the Wawona Tunnel, the valley suddenly exploding out the windshield. El Capitan square as a knuckle, Bridal Veil fall shredding wind. At Upper Pines, east end of the valley under Glacier Point, with the Merced whispering nearby, we swung into C-loop and did the choreography. Tent up, rainfly tight, bare lockers slammed shut like a vault. Quiet hours were posted right at the kiosk, the way park rules always are, reasonable, godlike. I like ordinary orders, no scent in the tent. It's something we tell new campers, a preventative spell. It's also the way I try to live. Store whatever's dangerous in metal. Lock it away. The first ribbon was the color of a traffic cone, tied shoulder high to a pine. Not park tape, too narrow, almost delicate. It twitched once though there was no breeze. When I rubbed it between my fingers, it felt faintly warm, like a radio that's been off for 5 minutes. I told Jonah it was litter. He filmed it like a clue. Upper Pines went blue with evening. A ranger truck ghosted past. Everyone in earshot went a little quieter, like an adult had walked into the dorm. Stellar's jays heckled. Somewhere, a kid ignored a parent about marshmallows. 2 tents over, someone laughed into someone else's hoodie, that breathless, soft kind of laugh that gets muffled on purpose. Zippers whispered, YouTube-friendly romance, the trees pretending not to hear. Jonah headed to the restroom by Curry Village, Half Dome Village, but we still say Curry, promising not to interview strangers in the hand-washing line. He returned with another orange ribbon he'd found tied to a bare box, grinning like he'd been kissed by luck. Branding for the trip, he said, and held it up for his camera. Black pencil marks ran down one side, LS-41. My old call sign from the Chico repeater. The one stamped on the week I misheard a location and sent an engine crew 4 ridges the wrong way while the wind did what wind does. A man died behind those ridges. After that, even the way I said my own name felt like an error code. Cute, Jonah said, and the grin slid off when he saw my face. He tucked the ribbon away without another word. We ate. Ramen tastes like feast when you're under granite. The Merced muttered, a patient paper-tearing sound. Glacier Point loomed chalky. Stars stitched themselves in familiar places. Then a second sound braided into the night. 3 bright notes like a tin whistle, pause, 3 again. Old, like something played through would rather than air. I didn't say, do you hear that? Dispatchers learn not to infect a room with their panic. I stood, smoothed my palms on my jeans, and said I wanted to stretch my legs. Jonah fell in beside me, for once not filming. The orange ribbons weren't random anymore. They made a breadcrumb line across the loop road, past a posted bear sighting sheet where someone had drawn an optimistic paw print, and along the paved path toward the river. Pine duff gave way to cold air laced with water. The ribbon ahead of us lifted and rotated, showing its pale underside like a semaphore flag. We crossed the short footbridge, boards slick with mist, and the river breathed up into our faces, cool and human. On the far bank, a tree had blown down years ago and been polished by 1,000 hands. On that smooth back, someone had rubbed a name with graphite and rain into the grain, dark and certain. Serrano L. The handwriting wasn't historical. It was tonight's. My throat closed. The whistle sounded again. 3 notes, patience, 3 notes. An old search signal, from before radios got good and people believed you could throw your voice a mile. Jonah, who jokes when he's afraid, didn't. He stepped half behind me, like we were kids again, and I was the one with permission to talk to strangers. I counted my breath in tens the way we coach callers in hysterics. 10 to calm, 20 to stay, 30 to find. When I hit 30, the panic peeled off like an old sticker and something steadier showed through. I faced the dark trees and spoke like I was on air. Copy you, I said, and my voice sounded like it had bones. This is El Serrano. Conducting accountability. It felt ridiculous. It felt exactly right. Whitaker. I called, not sure where the name came from until I saw, faint as old chalk, Whitaker under my own. The ribbon to our left lifted once and fell, present. Annie! A low ripple passed through the boughs, like a quilt being shaken out, present. Lantern 1? Lantern 2? 2 mild flickers bloomed and died along the path, as if someone had shaded a lamp with their fingers, and then thought better of it. Names rose like bubbles in my chest. Familiar in the way a story you were told asleep is familiar in the morning. I called and the forest answered in its own grammar. A pine cone rolling, a whisper from the river's seam, a thread of colder air against my wrist. With each present, the Merced quieted a fraction, the fear took one step back, and the ribbons went lazier, like tired flags after a parade. I knew, with the same bodily certainty, you know a stove is hot, that these weren't the kind of ghosts who wanted to be seen. They wanted their roll call finished. The relief of the living is a poor substitute for that small, holy word, accounted for. At the last name, the ribbons hung dull and ordinary. Plastic again. Cheap again. Jonah let out a breath I didn't know he was holding and leaned his shoulder into mine. We walked back the way people do after something intimate, quiet, overly polite with the world. At the bare locker, we set the ribbon marked LS, 41 inside like it was a scented thing that needed locking away. Back at the site, the couple too tense over had settled into the easy hush that follows wanting. Someone strummed a guitar softly and didn't hurt anyone with it. The ranger truck slid by one last time, a moving square of reassurance. We climbed into the tent. Jonah's feet were cold. He pressed them to my calf because some habits don't die, and I cussed him out under my breath. He laughed, small and clean. I lay there listening for phones that weren't ringing. Dispatch trains you to hear the bad thing before it arrives. The job wires your ears wrong. Tonight the only thing I heard was counting. It threaded the river's mutter and rode my pulse. 10 to calm, 20 to stay, 30 to find. I counted back, slow as prayer. Somewhere upriver, the whistle answered once, grateful, not needy, and went out. The valley swallowed the echo the way it swallows everything, gently, like a mother, like a grave. Just before sleep, I opened the bare locker to tuck in the ramen trash and saw the ribbon had turned itself over. On the pale underside, in pencil as soft as breath, someone had written roll complete and underlined it twice, the way you do when you finally put a thing to bed. I closed the locker. The metal rang like a bell, and for the first time in months, my name belonged to me. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, and when we won the Elkmont Firefly Lottery, I took it as a sign the year might stop biting for a while. Elkmont is the campground where Little River hushes itself over stones, where the old Daisy Town cabins lean into the trees and pretend they're still invited. I told my son, Jace, born in Nashville, we'd keep light discipline, red headlamps only, no phones, stay on the path during the viewing. He rolled his eyes and packed a notebook, because 16 is an age that believes in exceptions. Photinus Carolinus has a pattern I could chant in my sleep, a burst of flashes together, then a blackout long enough to feel like anticipation. Synchronous is the word the brochures use, but to me it feels like agreement, like the way a good kitchen works when everybody knows where the spoons live. I brought Dad's old tripod, even though rangers hate anything that sticks out into a trail. I wasn't filming. I just wanted to count it with my own lungs and see if the math matched. We set our tent under hemlocks, the bare box a square reassurance. Citronella made the air lemon bitter. 2 sites over, a couple were tangled in each other's jackets, laughing into the fabric to keep it campground quiet. That kind of almost private intimacy has its own weather. My husband, Samuel, born in Memphis, used to press me into the countertop with that same soft urgency while a pot boiled over. A YouTube-corrected memory with all heat and no skin. I turned away from the couple and stacked our marshmallows in neat pyramids, the way he used to tease me for doing. We walked past the Daisy Town cabins before full dark. Keep out signs looked bored. The porches bowed as if they were refusing a curtsy. Jace told me about the resort days, gramophones on planks, men in straw boaters, women with sashes tied flat as promises. He has a way of talking like he's dropping breadcrumbs he expects me to follow. The air back there has its own temperature. It tightened my forearms, like the room does just before a patient says something important. When the fireflies started, they arrived like a choir clearing its throat. Knee height first, then waist, then shoulder, the pulses finding each other and rising. People around us went reverent without being told. Even the kids knew not to squeal. The synchronous bursts climbed a minute, 2, and then blacked out together. That shared dark felt ceremonial, the way churches draw breath before anyone walks an aisle. Then deeper in the trees, a second set of lights woke up, offbeat, wrong. 2 flashes, a pause, then 2, as if someone backstage were calling a different dance. Don't, I said, and Jace had already stepped off the path. Not far, he's a good kid. Just a foot into leaf mold, so he could see. The second lights weren't scattered. They made lanes, narrow aisles like gym lines painted in air. Under the crushed green smell, I caught something powdery, old perfume like the kind you smell on a hug from a person you only know from photographs. Shapes moved where the aisles opened, and I thought with a certainty I couldn't explain, they're setting a dance. I heard the regular flash pattern like a waltz, 1, 2, 3. Under it, the offbeat lights tapped something else, a ring knocked on a table. 2 pause, 2. Morse lives in my fingertips from years of night watches with Samuel, the 2 of us nerding out over old ship codes. S. M. The lights spelled, slow and tender as a hand on a cheek. I put my palm to my throat to keep his name from getting out. Grief is a second voice that doesn't care about rules. A girl my age, if you could call that a girl, stood in the knot path. She was built out of light and more shadow than a body should carry. When she raised her hand, the fireflies nearest her brightened the way a house does when someone turns the dimmer and says there, that's better. I couldn't tell you her face. I could tell you the shape of attention on it, the practiced way she recognized a boy and expected him to step in time. I wanted to. It was like hearing the right beat for the first time in a life of static. Jace. My mother's voice had my middle name folded in, DMV Sirius. She moved beside me without flattening a single fern. My boots, by contrast, made little murders everywhere. The lanes of light drifted to accommodate me, welcoming, graceful. Hunger can set a table and smile until you sit. The offbeat switched letters with a neat little flourish. J. C. E. My name tasted electric on my tongue. That's the part that scared me, the way it felt flattering. He was born at 3:14 a.m. at Ascension St. Thomas Midtown in Nashville. I said, steady as if I were on shift, reminding a patient where they are. Room 417 had the poster with the blue heron in it. I put you in a green knit hat because the pink ones were gone. You scared the nurses with your first cry, and nothing bad happened. I anchored him in a night that had nothing to do with these woods. He blinked, the way babies do, his 16-year-old body remembering something by accident. The lights dimmed near the girl as if to make space for my voice. She tilted her head. Somewhere to our right, behind caution tape and a sign about staying on trails, a gramophone that wasn't there cleared its throat. The air smelled of old lemon oil on wood. I knew if I stepped forward the aisle would seal behind me like the river closing over a stone. My red headlamp was in my hand. The rangers say use red to protect the fireflies. I cupped the beam and made it flicker, hard and clean. Stop. In Morse, the code for stop is just a period, but the language of a room matters. So I banged out STOP anyway, wide and deliberate, bigger than my palm. The second lights hesitated in one square of the grid, and then the grid flowed to correct it, which told me there was a mind there, or a habit acting as a mind. Porch rules, I said quietly because my grandmother raised me with mountain manners. You don't dance with strangers on the first knock. Jace's palm found mine. Cold. I realized something had steadied him moments earlier, a knot hand cool as river stones, and my stomach did a small flip I refused to dignify with fear. I squeezed twice. He squeezed back. Behind us, the synchronous pulses kept time, the regular choir refusing to be bullied by this second, off-kilter band. People on the main path gasped softly at the blackout, then the return, like waves breathing. A ranger's red light floated past at a distance, careful, a small moving planet. I took off my wedding ring, a thin, ordinary band I'd threaded on a cord and worn under my shirt, and pressed it to my lips, then to Jace's palm. It was ridiculous, but everything about the night was ridiculous. Hold, I said. I turned the red beam off and plunged our square into honest dark. The second lights edged closer, emboldened, and then the regular fireflies hit their burst, and the woods became a rising yes. In that larger agreement, the offbeat lost its authority. The grid fell apart, aisles dissolving like chalk in rain. The girl of light stood one heartbeat longer, expectant, then inclined her head the smallest degree, like good evening then, and went out. We walked back the trail like people who have done something too intimate to talk about yet. The couple two sights over had settled into the afterglow hush that carries a laugh at half volume. Someone zipped a tent and apologized with the zipper itself. At the bare box, I set the ring back under my shirt. The metal touched skin and warmed. In the tent, Jace's feet were blocks of ice. He pressed them against my calf, and I cussed him with love. He laughed, short and clean. Little River sang its careful math. Through the thin fabric, I could almost hear porch boards creak. The way would remembers a dance. Maybe the past throws a party every June and tries new names, testing which of us will step onto the floor. When sleep finally took me, I saw the offbeat wink once more, SAM, and I said no out loud, a word that felt like a mercy for both of us. In the morning, on the railing of a keep-out cabin, a dead moth rested like a paper brooch. Its wings were the exact color of my ring. We didn't touch it. We kept to the path. And when the sun burned the night's perfumes out of the pines, Little River kept talking as if it had been saying the same thing all along. Stay with the living. Let the lights dance without you. I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and I count when I'm afraid. Strokes on an erg, footsteps to a finish line, breaths between pain spikes. Counting makes a room where panic can't fit. When Pilar, born in Miami, a maritime painter who can stare at one wave for an hour and call it work, booked Blackwood's campground in Acadia, I promised I'd stop counting long enough to enjoy the spruce and the sea. Rehab shoulder or not, I wanted to believe a forest could reset me. Blackwood sits in the fir-scented dark south of Bar Harbor, a short walk from the Park Loop Road and the ocean path where the rocks cough up spray under Otter Cliffs. We pitched the tent in damp needles, bare box latched, and the fog moved in like a careful guest that means to stay. Advection fog, sea-warm air rolling over cold water, took the campground in both hands and kneaded. Pilar painted in the last light, a thumbnail study of the spruce skyline, cadmium green the color of old dollar bills. You like the lighthouse, she said. Base Harbor Head. We can go tomorrow. I nodded and watched the fog eat the distance until the next campsite was a rumor and the ocean's hush was the only fact. When it got cold, we zipped the bags together. The tent walls breathed with us, close and private. Her fingers found the warm strip of skin where my shirt rode up. I made a sound I hadn't made in a while and pressed my mouth to the hinge of her jaw, salt and pine. We were quiet on purpose, YouTube-safe intimacy, all heat, no skin, and the fog outside leaned in like a curious ant. When we finally stilled, the fabric above us had filmed over with dew, a second ceiling trembling. I woke at what my shoulder calls 3 a.m. because the pain keeps its own clock. The campground was a bowl of milk. Somewhere beyond the trees, a bell rang once, clear brass, not the electronic bleat of modern horns. One strike only like punctuation. The tent wall near my knees carried 4 faint chalky lines with a diagonal slash through them. 5. I ran my thumb over the marks and felt nothing. Not chalk, not damp, just the memory of someone keeping score. I wanted to wake Pilar, but the dark had the feeling of a classroom exam, and I knew I had to show my work. I unzipped the flap, and the fog poured in, cold over my face like a cloth. I counted quietly to see if I could hear the ocean between numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, hush. The bell again, farther this time, then closer, as if the sound were walking the loops, checking the sights. Morning burned the fog to gauze, and everything looked ordinary until I saw the soil around our door. Heel-to-toe paces pressed in the needles, small feet leading away from the tent in a straight line toward the ocean path, 40 prints exactly. The last 10 slurred as if whoever was making them fell and got up without ceremony. I tasted salt on the air, and it had the old rope, wet iron quality of a ship's bilge. Pilar squinted, her breath a ghost. Did you go out? I didn't. I almost added I never sleepwalk, but my shoulder twinged, a hot wire tucked under my scapula, and instead I said, let's walk to the cliffs before breakfast. The ocean path was slick where the fog had licked it. We followed the crushed granite ribbon past Otter Cove to the stone ledges where tourists pose for photos and rangers beg them not to flirt with the edge. Thunderhole grumbled once, even on a small swell. The fog kept its hand on our backs, guiding. At a flat of granite, a set of tally marks had been rubbed into the salt bloom. For vertical, 1 cross. Another 5 and another. 30 in all, etched with something softer than chalk and harder than wind. Pilar touched the lines and then my bad shoulder gently, like she was checking the heat of a pan. You're counting, she said. Even when you're not. I'm not the only one, I said, and told her about the bell. She stared into the gray and smiled the way she does when a painting is finally stepping onto the canvas. Let's come back tonight, she said. At low tide. I tried not to ask how she knew the tide table by heart when I'd seen her painting for hours instead of checking the chart. Pilar knows water the way I know a stroke rate, by feel, by air on the teeth. We hiked Cadillac Mountain in the afternoon with 100 other people, all pretending they discovered it alone. My shoulder nagged. Back at camp, the fog came early. By full dark, the wall near our door had an extra set of marks. 5 more neat a little higher, as if written by a person standing in a boat. The bell sounded, closer and sharply to the left this time, and I knew it was standing at the clearing where the ocean path turns. We went together. Our headlamps were red cones in the white. Needles creaked underfoot like whispers in a pew. The ocean arrived between trees as a long intake of breath. The bell rang once, and the fog let go of a shape, a woman in a long coat, hair tied back, shoulders hunched against a wind that wasn't there. She did not look at us. She counted. 31, she said, but it wasn't a voice, more a shaping of the fog that made the number feel true in my mouth. 32. She lifted her knee, as if stepping over a line of rope laid on deck. 33. I felt the number hit something in my body I keep for rowing cadence. My old coach used to tap a pencil on the rail, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'd slip into the swing without thinking, the boat breathing me. I raised my bad arm, and my shoulder lit like a flare, and for a second I went blind with the brightness of it. When my vision unkinked, I saw more of them. Men in wool caps who had once shaved their beards with knives, a boy with his hands cupped to keep match flame, a shape on hands and knees whose skirts darkened with water that wasn't wet. They paced in a line toward the ledges, counting to the number that would save them and never finding it. Pilar's fingers threaded mine. No further, she said. If I finish the count, I said, they stop using our legs. You sure? Her grip tightened. No, I kissed her quickly, not a brave kiss, just the kind you give when you need to borrow a little courage through the mouth. Then I stepped past her. I counted. 1 to 10 is easy. The body can do anything 10 times. 11 to 20 scraped. By 27 the fog crowded, so close it felt like damp cloth in my mouth. My shoulders shook. The woman in the long coat matched me breath for breath, not looking, just sharing cadence like rowers in a dark boat someone's steering blind. 30. A swell pulled back and the stone under my boots gleamed like a blade. 31. 32. The bell rang once. 33. If there's a right way to step onto wet granite at low tide inside a ghost count, I did not have it. My foot slid. Something cool closed around my forearm, fingers like running water, and steadied me. It wasn't Pilar, she was behind me with both hands on my pack. The woman in the coat paused, as if surprised she'd touched anything. She opened her mouth and a great tide of cold poured out and took the marks from the rock in one smooth lick. The line of pacing figures drank the last number and let it go like smoke. Back, Pilar said. The fog had begun, softly, politely, to count me. 1, 2, 3, knit into my pulse, trying to add me to the ledger. I stepped back. It counted again, this time with hunger. Pilar tugged. We left the ledge and the counting faltered, as if it wasn't allowed off the stone. At the tent, the wall was clean, the 5-bar gates gone as if a teacher had erased the board. We crawled inside, and I let Pilar fold me up. My shoulder hummed like something with its own battery, but the pain had shifted. It belonged to me again, and not to some boat burned to memory. She pressed her mouth to my temple, and we breathed together until the tent's second ceiling of dew trembled, and let go all at once, raining a fine blessing. I fell asleep counting the way I did when I was 12 and swam laps, not to measure but to praise. In the morning we walked to Base Harbor Headlight, because Pilar wanted to paint the white tower against a sky the color of dishwater. The light winked, and I waited for the bell that didn't ring, and for once I didn't mind the silence. On the granite by the path a child had arranged shells into a neat 33 without knowing why. I left them, a mile marker for somebody else's legs, and took Pilar's hand like it was the only number that mattered. I was born in Amarillo, Texas, and I make a living giving dead paper a second voice. Archivist, municipal. Funny how those two words can sound like dust and a heartbeat in the same breath. Rafi was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and he runs search and rescue with the calm of a man who has seen panic from the inside and memorized the exits. We picked Watchman Campground in Zion because the red stone feels like a cathedral someone left roofless on purpose, and because the Virgin River knows how to hush you without making you small. The Watchman itself stood like a stern uncle at the end of camp, that square-shouldered spire catching last light. Ponderosis breathed vanilla, cottonwoods fretted their coin-shaped leaves. Shuttle buses ferried tourists deeper up canyon, their brakes sighing like tired laughs. Springdale flashed its tidy lights just beyond the park line, pizza, beer, gear shops. And then there was us, Loop B, tent staked in sandy soil, river murmuring 20 paces away, the Paras trail sliding past like a polite snake. I brought a leather folio with the newest problem, scans of an 1870s settlement ledger, pencil names and ink oaths from people who cut irrigation ditches and married in borrowed suits. I was digitizing for the county, but the book had a temper. Names I read aloud had a way of showing up other places. On my grocery list where I hadn't written them, on the fogged mirror after a shower, once, faintly, across the tender inside of my wrist like I'd slept on a stencil. We built a small fire and ate easy food with our knees touching. The sky turned that bruised color the desert does right before it goes indigo. Rafi propped himself on an elbow, his grin a patient half-moon. "You and your ghosts," he said. "You and your hikers who swear they know the trail until they don't." He flicked my knuckle. "Fair." After the flames settled to a steady talk, we crawled into the tent and zipped the world out. Desert nights carry a sweetness people don't expect. Warm skin, cold air, the pepper of crushed sage on your tongue if you've been touching plants. We were quiet the way campground lovers are quiet, his mouth at my throat, my hand under his shirt, palm on the heat-soaked flat of his stomach. Gravel dug into my knee, and it only made the wanting sharper, more human. "Hey," he whispered, as if he were catching me in some small theft we'd planned together. I said his name in the way I only say it when it's just us, soft, a little wrecked. When we stilled, a canyon wren ran its thin laugh down a scale. Wind fingered the rainfly, polite as a stranger asking to pass in a grocery aisle. I might have slept. I woke to a sound like a quill nib kissing paper. Not inside the tent, outside along bark. The Virgin kept her steady arithmetic. Rafi breathed deep and slow. I unzipped enough to peer out with one eye, and saw the nearest cottonwood blushing silver under moonlight, its skin scored in tidy cuts like someone had been practicing handwriting. I slid into my shoes and padded out, headlamp cupped. Names. Not carved with a knife, lifted, the way desert varnish peels to reveal a paler truth beneath. M. Coulter, so help me. Esther Ann till harvest. E. Crab, pay by spring. Familiar from the ledger in my folio. The tree had become a notary, and I'd brought the book to feed it. Behind me, the tent zipper rasped. "Cam." Rafi's voice was sleep rough, something that always made my chest ache, like I was being offered a private view of a place most people don't get to see. He stepped out barefoot, the cold legal pad yellow of the sand taking his prints. For a second, his presence made the names look silly, grown men and women begging trees to hold them to a promise. Then he read a line aloud, almost to himself. "I won't leave you again." The river thickened, and something in the dark leaned in to listen. "Don't," I said too late. The vow had already found a mouth. He shivered and looked at me like I'd pinched him. "What?" "You said it," I whispered. "Here. It's just words." The cottonwood disagreed. A faint, fresh score appeared in the bark, the same cramped hand as the old names but with the impatience of modern speed, as if the tree couldn't write fast enough. "R. Salazar won't leave again." The river changed its voice, lower, the way a throat goes when it's about to sing. Somewhere far up canyon, air moved in the narrows with a long whisper. The notary had witnessed. We tried to laugh it off. We went back to the tent, our bravado brittle, our bodies instinctively closer, touching from heel to shoulder. Rafi kissed my hair and said, "I'm here." It was meant to soothe. In the small hours, I woke because he wasn't. The tent door was open to the cold. He stood 3 paces beyond, on the line where the Paras trail's pale gravel cuts the dark, hands at his sides like someone under inspection. His toes were curled hard into the sand. "Raf," I said and went to him. When I took his elbow, something in the air tightened, an invisible seat belt cinching. He took 1 step toward camp and gagged, dry, a horrible little hitch like a fish trying to swallow a hook. He coughed and forced a swallow, and the unseen strap eased. "There's a line," he said, small. "I can't cross it." We tested the boundary like idiots. He could circle, but not leave the radius that felt like the reach of the watchman's shadow. He could approach the river, but not the road. He could step right up to the cottonwood and press his forehead against its skin, and when he did, the leaves shivered over his head as if a breeze had learned his name. "Okay," I said, librarian calm, pretending to be man calm. "Okay." I fetched the ledger folio. Pages that had scanned milky clean at the office now smelled like iron and mouse. The entries flickered under headlamp, sometimes too faint to read, sometimes dark as bruises. Every oath ended the same way, a little flourish under the sentence, and the words "so help me." "Don't say that." I told Rafi when he opened his mouth on instinct. Not here. Then what? Let me talk. I read the names softly, trying to keep them in my mouth where they couldn't stick to anything but a promise I never intended to complete. M. Coulter, paid at the ditch. Esther and stayed through harvest. E. Crab, didn't pay by spring and left on a wagon with a broken wheel. The cottonwood listened with a kindness that made me want to cry. A breeze uncoiled from the river and wrapped my wrist snugly, the way a well-thrown rope finds purchase. The pressure left dark bands across my skin, not bruises exactly, but the suggestion of them, as if the place were trying on my pulse to see if we fit. Not him, I said to the wind, to the rock, to the ledger that had used me like a megaphone. Take me. Cam, Rafi said sharply. It already has you, I told him. You gave it what it wanted. He put his palm on my mouth, and it would have been an intimacy if it weren't for the way his hand shook. For a moment we were boys again in older bodies, sharing the same fear like a blanket. If I could carry it for you, I would. I kissed his palm, slow, then took his wrist and guided his hand down. The canyon watched shamelessly. The privacy of the tent had been a courtesy. This place had parishioner eyes. I pricked my fingertip on the metal edge of the folio. The stupid, petty hurt, and the ledger drank the drop that fell. The ink on the page darkened like a throat taking water after a long walk. Cameron Dean Wells, I said, and the name felt larger than me. Born Amarillo, Texas. I promised to speak the names you cannot erase. Cam, don't. I promise to come back and read them again when the river drops and the wren sings laugh, laugh, laugh down stone. I promise not to make any promise I won't keep. So, I stopped, the last words in my mouth like a horse I refused to lead to water. The cottonwood waited. The river held its breath. There is a trick in old contracts. If you cannot say so help me, you can name your helper. By the watchman, I said. By the Virgin and by every cottonwood in her shade. The relief in the bark was palpable, a loosening, as if the tree had been waiting for someone to invent a loophole politely. Something cooled the back of my neck the way a tongue of river water does when you kneel and dunk your head. It ran down my spine, not lewd, but unseemly in the way being washed is unseemly if you didn't ask for it. The air pressed close around both of us, a laying on of hands from a congregation with too many fingers. Gravel bit my bare knee, and, God help me, the pain made me honest. Release him, I said. Nothing moved. Then Rafi took a half step past the invisible line and didn't choke. He looked at me like a man who has been underwater slightly too long. Another step. No gag. The strap had loosened, not vanished. He was freer, not free. What's the price? He asked softly. The ledger wants a name it doesn't already own, I said. My true one. You just gave it. Not the legal one, I said, and laughed in a way that sounded like I'd swallowed a handful of grit. The one you call me. He understood. There are names you only speak in the dark. He shook his head. You're not giving that to a tree. You already gave it to me, I said. The canyon listened with both hands cupped. My throat tightened, saying it felt like unbuttoning the last, smallest thing you have. Raf, I said, which is his and mine alike, then lower, the other name, the private one, the syllables that make him look open-mouthed and unguarded. The cottonwood shivered. The ledger page went warm under my fingertips. Rafi said my own hidden name silently. No sound, just the shape, the way mouths can pray, and the river sighed as if we'd satisfied some ancient etiquette. We didn't go back to the tent right away. We stood with the tree watching us. The night had grown teeth. Every star felt like a pin, and every pin had a little thread tied to it leading down into sand. I still feel it, he said. The boundary. I know. I pressed my forehead to his, and we were two men in our underwear under the stare of a canyon that believes consent is what you don't say no to. It felt indecent and ceremonial at once, my hands on his ribs, his mouth on mine, not for show, not for anyone but the rock that wanted us to believe we were being witnessed for our own good. We made a bed of our bodies standing up, careful as thieves. YouTube-friendly heat, a lot of breath, the small desperate sound he makes when he's close and happy and scared. Desire and fear share a vocabulary. The canyon took notes, and for once, I didn't mind. When we lay down finally, spent and shivering, the ledger's pages felt lighter, as if we had paid one coin of a debt that never ends. Rafi slept with his palm flat over my sternum, like he was pinning me to the safe side of a map. I dreamed a door in the watchman, and behind it, files and files of names in the careful hands of people who believed writing it down made it more real, not less. At dawn the cottonwood wore our night like jewelry. On a low limb, A fresh line in the bark had arranged itself with modesty. Read in spring, CDW. Rafi stepped to the edge of whatever circle still held him, and beyond it easily, then back, testing. The strap was slack. It would tighten again if we lied, I suspected. The canyon doesn't punish, it corrects. We packed slowly. The shuttle brakes sighed. A canyon wren did its laugh down stone like a secret handshake. Before we left, I touched my fingertips to the cottonwood's cool skin and said, "We'll come back." It wasn't an oath, it was a plan. As we drove toward the south entrance, Springdale opening its reliable little grid, Rafi rolled my private name around his mouth once like a fine thing he meant to keep. "You're mine," he said, plain as water, and then, catching himself, he added, "If you want." "Only if you want," I said back, which is the only promise a canyon can't counterfeit. The watchman watched us go without blinking, and the river kept its ledger the way it always has. In motion, in sand, in the soft arithmetic it asks of the living. I was born in Hilo, Hawaii, where rain is so common it stops being weather and becomes personality. The whole rainforest felt familiar the first minute we rolled past the ranger station. Ferns taller than me bowing under last night's drip, Sitka spruce shouldering the sky like patient giants. Tamsin, born in Portland, Oregon, killed the engine, tipped her head, and smiled the way she does when a room has good acoustics. "Listen," she said, palms up. The forest was not silent. It breathed. Drip drip from every needle, a brown-throated low from the Ho River, the compressed applause of distant rain-shifting leaves. We set camp under a maple draped in velvet moss. At the kiosk a laminated sheet warned about Roosevelt elk, "Give them space," and a handwritten note reminded people not to feed the jays. Our sight looked toward the river. The air had that clean, mineral cool you can drink without a cup. I'd come to map nurse logs and sample their fungal companions for my dissertation. Tamsin had brought a hard case full of contact mics and a recorder to collect the way green sounds. 2 hours to blue, she said, meaning dusk. Let's wire a log. We picked a down giant that had already begun its second career. Hemlock seedlings marching its spine, huckleberry crowding the sunny side, a whole tiny forest standing on a fallen nurse. I scraped a thumbnail of bark to expose firmer wood, and Tamsin attached 2 piezos with painter's tape, one near the root flare, one farther down where water had pooled and stained the grain black. In our headphones, the log spoke in low clicks and tides, like someone shuffling cards in another room. "I need room tone," she said, setting levels, and we sat back to let the host speak without us. The Hall of Moss's trail lay a 10-minute walk away. Families came and went there all day, awed into whispering. Here, beyond the foot traffic, time dressed differently. Banana slugs slid their yellow commas over the duff like punctuation. At full dark the rain began, careful and endless. We zipped into the tent and folded into each other's heat. The chill makes you greedy with warmth. Her feet found my calves and stole shamelessly. We didn't talk much. I listened to the drip pattern double and redouble on the fly until it braided itself into a rhythm I couldn't place. I might have slept. Akiko. Her whisper was inside the headphones lying between our sleeping bags, not in the tent. I sat up fast enough to make the dome shiver. Tamsin's eyes were open, fixed on the recorder's tiny screen glowing green. The signal coming in from the log was strong, too strong for rain. I slid the cans on. 012, a whisper traveled through wood, not air, dry, fine, threaded with a furry undertone like moss being stroked backward. Words more shape than sound, we keep it all. I pulled the other cup off one ear to hear the actual forest. The rain kept its patient work. No human voices, no campers nearby. In the headphones, the nurse log whispered again, a breath drawn from yards and years away, arriving through the mycelial dark. We keep the steps, we keep the lost, we keep the said and the not said. I don't scare easily. Science trains you to widen your stance and describe things. Conductive vibration along lignin pathways, I said, half to Tamsin, half to the part of me that believed in naming as a form of weatherproofing. The mics are picking up. Thoughts, she finished dry. She was braver than me in all the useless ways and softer in the ones that matter. Or we've built a radio out of rot. We took the recorder outside under our red headlamps. The rain blessed our faces, cold and clean. Tamsin turned the gain a notch. The whisper clarified, a choir of very small mouths using the wood to shape breath they didn't have. Phrases unraveled and knitted back in. The man who dropped his ring. The girl who counted to 33 and fell. The one who said, "I'm not going back." Between them a sentence formed that belonged to me and had never left my mouth. Sacrifice sustains the forest. It was a line from my thesis draft, a neat, dangerous sentence that made me sound braver than I am. Once, 3 summers ago in the Olympics, I'd cut a cedar sample bigger than my permit allowed. I'd done it because the saw felt good in my hand, and because I wanted a result clean enough to publish. I'd bandaged the raw face with bark and apology. I hadn't told anyone. The nurse log exhaled, the sound of old paper turned briskly. Tell it, it murmured, through capillaries of rot and root and rain. Tamsin didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the trunk, as if the log were a stage where the smallest play in the world had just begun. If you want to go, she said quietly, we go. The whole river made its brown music. Somewhere up trail, an elk knocked wood with an antler, a slow, deliberative clack. I thought of how the seedlings stood shoulder to shoulder on our log, each one stealing a sip and giving a breath back. The forest was busy with exchanges too layered for me to measure. If it wanted payment, it wasn't malice, it was economy. I picked up the recorder and leaned close to the mic. My name is Akiko Okada, I said, and the log accepted my weight as if I were a 4th-generation seedling. Born Hilo, Hawaii. 3 summers ago, near Lake Quinault, I cut more than I should have. Rain pattered. I felt the trees lean in, not toward punishment but toward inventory. I wanted clean data. I wanted a graph that could stand up without me. The cedar bled. I pretended it hadn't. 2:31. The signal swelled, a deepening under the whisper like the hoot swallowed before an owl decides to speak. Ours now, the log breathed, not triumphant, satisfied. Something moved at the edge of our headlamp cones. An elk cow, broad and calm, stepped onto the path and stood sentinel, ears forward. She swung her head, not at us, but toward the river, then toward the dark beyond, the way a neighbor points out a loose dog you should know about. We should stay put, Tamsin said, until it's done with us. The whisper came again, quicker now, a patter of syllables that felt less like words and more like fingers searching pockets. I heard other people's small, devastating truths. I lied about the tooth. I kept the cash. I wanted her to fail, pass along the log, taken up by the fungal network and moved like sugars. The nurse log was not hungry. It was a bank. Do we have to leave something else? I asked. The answer was physical. The duff at our feet stirred. A pale thread, the color of skim milk, poked up between huckleberry leaves, blinked in our light, and withdrew. The mycelium was right there under our boots, trading all the time. I felt foolish for thinking I'd discover anything the hoe hadn't already measured. Then we pay attention, Tamsin said. She slipped one contact off the log and pressed it, gently, to my sternum through my rain jacket. The headphones sent me the slow drum of my heart, messy and human, beating against a universe of whispering wood. Make a bridge, she said. Just for a minute. I laughed, short, nervous, and nodded. We stood like that, wired to a fallen giant, my heart's clumsy bass line braided to the log's murmurs. The elk huffed once and stepped off the path, satisfied. In the cans, the nurse log's whisper thinned, then softened, then quieted altogether, not because it had nothing left to say, but because it had learned our rhythm and let it stand. We left the mics overnight. In the tent, with the rain keeping time on the fly, we didn't sleep so much as drift in and out of a room where the walls breathe. If I dreamed, it was of small hands pressing seedlings into velvet wrought, the way a baker nests loaves for proofing. At first light the forest wore a million jeweled threads. When we reached the log, the tape was still running, cold as river stone to the touch. On its back, right where my palm had rested, a tight ring of huckleberry seedlings had lifted their heads in the night, 12 green mouths open to the new day. The recorder screen showed a final time code I won't forget. 4 hours, 17 minutes, and 29 seconds. 4 hours, 17 minutes, 29 seconds of keeping. We played the last minute. 4 hours, 16 minutes, and 30 seconds. Rain like soft beads. 4 hours, 16 minutes, and 58 seconds, a breath, not ours, settling. 4 hours, 17 minutes, and 12 seconds. A small sound that could have been a word if you'd been inclined to forgive it for being wood. Enough. We broke camp slowly. On the Hall of Mosses, parents shushed kids to a whisper. A ranger in a poncho nodded to us like he knew and didn't need to. Before we left, I laid my palm on the nurse log once more and said out loud, "Thank you." The wood was cool and exact under my skin. The hoe kept doing what it does, summering a fallen giant into a nursery, turning our unspoken into soil, making a ledger no hand can burn.